Wasserman Lande, she's Ma'ariv columnist on Arab affairs and the CEO and founder of Ruth Global Innovate Advisory. Thanks so much for coming into our studio.
To see you too.
So first of all, U.S. President Donald Trump, we're just hearing, was nominated for the 2021 Nobel Peace Prize for this accord, this normalization deal, not really a peace deal. What do you make of that?
If you allow me, I will put the normalization before the Peace Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize, with your permission. And I'll just comment and say that it is quite an amazing achievement. As somebody who lived and worked in Cairo for 3 years, I have never seen headlines in Arabic, frontline headlines screaming the embrace of Israel.
There was also condemnation coming out of Cairo and Egypt. There were quite a few intellectuals there who were saying how the Arabs, again, deserted the Palestinians and their cause for a Palestinian state. It wasn't all rosy.
No, of course not. I'm saying in terms of the actual achievement UAE Israel-wise, this is something out of the ordinary. Of course, nothing is black and white. Nothing is completely uncomplicated. And there are complexities, for example, the F-35s, the issue of security, the issue of the Palestinians not having completely solved all their problems with Israel, and yet some Arab states accepting them. But I must say that the step taken, the quite courageous step taken, and I don't want to play that down, despite the F-35s, despite the gifts that they may receive, the courage taken to be the first, the very first, to really publicly and outwardly completely and utterly embrace the state of Israel is something that is a huge achievement. That, having said that, of course there are factors in the Arab world, in Egypt but not only, that have been less than pleased about this whole thing.
Yeah, of course.
By the way, the president of Egypt has come out and said some very positive comments, which is not a given the fact that 40 years of peace with Egypt has not given birth to a very warm relationship between Israel and Egypt. So the fact that he has come out and said some wonderful things is also, I would say, quite an achievement.
Okay, I want to really utilize your experience as a diplomat in Cairo and ask you a little bit for a comparison perspective. It's been 40 years approximately since the peace accords with Egypt were signed. In '94, we saw the peace accords with Jordan being signed. It's been quite a while since Israel made peace or arrived at the White House lawn for a signing ceremony. Can we make any comparison between what's happening with the UAE now and the normalization that took place with Egypt and with Jordan later? Let's
put it very, very frankly on the table. The word normalization, or tatbi'a in Arabic, in Egypt is it's an antagonistic term. It wouldn't be a compliment. So if you would be blamed for having normalization, you would be actually refuted for having these kinds of ties. So the peace with Egypt, important as it is, strategic as it is, and it is highly, highly important and strategic. Of course, Jordan-Israeli relations as well have not even come close to warm, normalized relations. And that is because the Egyptian street has not been perhaps well enough prepared to embrace that kind of forsaking the Palestinians. For years and years, they have been taught both in the schoolroom, in the media, and so on, that the Palestinians need to be taken care of. Does the regime care? I would imagine that it cares to a degree, but of course, you know, the interests of Egypt first and strategic affairs first, and that's why the relationship between Egypt and Israel is at the foremost interest of the Egyptian regime, differently
a whole different story with
to intellectuals
the UAE.
And to the UAE, absolutely.
Yeah. I do want to ask you about what's to come after this deal. Israel was hoping that either Chad or Sudan or maybe even Saudi Arabia will be joining the signing ceremony at the White House next week. It doesn't seem to be happening, or at least not that we've heard of so far. Do you think any of them will make a move after the UAE? We're seeing the Arab League, by the way, convene today.
Well, the Arab League is a sort of a funny body, if you allow me to use that word politely, because it is a kind of a combination of all different bodies that have very, very different and sometimes very opposite interests. So there are very many nice words that come out of that organization, with all due respect, but not always very operative. So if we put that aside for a second, Chad, the son of the leader, was here. Hands were shaken, or rather elbows were touched, given the COVID-19, and an agreement is almost on the table. Even I think there is a will to open an embassy in Jerusalem, which is quite amazing.
What about the chances with Sudan?
Right. Sudan has a lot of internal problems, so many that I believe it would take a little more time. There is the camp that is in favor of the deal, given the very many positive outcomes, strategically, security-wise, and in terms of economic benefits from the U.S., if things will be opened. And there are those who are against, and they are fighting one another. So this is, I would say, dependent on the internal affairs in Sudan that are complex.
Okay. Saudi Arabia?
Oh, Saudi Arabia...
Already allowing planes from Israel to the UAE to cross their territory?
I would take even a guess, and this is a guess, I admit, that Abu Mazen's claim that he will not come right out and say something against the UAE, any kind of active action, and or allow for any of his Palestinians, the Palestinians in the West Bank, to speak against the deal, has something to do with Saudi Arabia. Also the fact that they allow Israeli aircraft to fly over their airspace. There is no doubt in my mind, to my analysis, that Saudi Arabia is in favor. Otherwise, I'm not sure this would have happened. But it will take it a little bit more time.
Okay. Ruth Wasserman Lande, thank you very much for coming into our studio.